Garth and I won for If Tomorrow Never Comes, which was kind of a strange thing because he was just getting his career off. And we won this Song of the Year, which was the biggest honor you can get because your songwriter peers vote on that. So about, 2 or 3 years ago, they had the 50th anniversary. And so Garth and I got to play at the Ryman and do If Tomorrow Never Comes together.
Welcome to Come and Pick It, the podcast edition. And we've got Mr. Kent Blazy here today, renowned songwriter and Nashville star, kind of celebrity person. So we're going to be talking to him about songwriting and that kind of thing and performing and all kinds of stuff. Kent, thanks so much for coming on with us.
Oh, it's a pleasure. I'm just oogling your guitars and drooling over them. That's all.
Well, there's some good ones. That Mossman back there is a really fine guitar that I don't know if you can see it or not. I'm kind of blocking it. Let me see if I can get out of the way of it. Yeah, I might show it to you in a minute.
Those are very fine, underrated guitars.
They are. This one is a 1995 Bobby Casey version. It's a really good guitar. So I really like it. So what you said you showed me a stack of papers. You're getting ready to play some new stuff here pretty quick.
Yeah, I cut a new record about a month ago and kind of been out promoting that. We played the Bluebird last Friday and Saturday night with the band, which is always fun. Electric guitar is my favorite thing to do, and we've got a show tomorrow night that we're doing in Franklin, Tennessee. And I'm very lucky because I have two of the guys that play on all my records play on with John Party and his band. So they were actually off for 2 weeks, so I could steal them away and go do my shows with me, which is always a lot of fun.
Wow. So you kind of build your schedule around their schedule maybe a little bit. With musicians like that, it wouldn't be a bad idea.
Yeah, I kind of follow their schedule diligently and see if I can get stuff scheduled when they're home. Sometimes that's pretty hard because they hit the road pretty hard. And so I've got another bass player and drummer that are also excellent that do the other gigs with me when I can't get them. My one consistent is my guitar player, Steve Allen, who's a phenomenal guitar player. And as long as he's there, I'll be there.
That's a good thing to have. It's hard, especially if you have chemistry with them, if they know your material. Good. That's hard to replace.
He is hard to replace. I tell him he's a brother from my same mother, but it's funny. We have such compatibility when we play. It's very interesting, and I wouldn't want to play without him.
That's a relationship it's really hard to explain to somebody that doesn't play music. You think that two good musicians can just kind of fall in together. But that's not really the case. So there's a compatibility thing that's kind of hard to explain.
Yeah, that's why I'm very lucky to have the two guys that play in John Party's band are my bass player and drummer. And I always like to have the bass player and drummer who played together before and know each other. And the other drummer and bass player that I use, they play together in the studio all the time. So that makes it so much easier because they know what each other's going to do and they're in the groove with each other. And that's the way to do it.
Absolutely. That rhythm section is kind of a single unit, and that when they're merged together, it really makes for some tight. You can really lay in. You don't have to do so much. You don't have to work so hard or kind of keep the song together. It just kind of flows.
They got your back.
Right. Exactly. I read a little thing on your bio, and it said it was talking about you being a member of the Songwriters Hall of Fame in Nashville, and that there was an allusion to the gala, the 50th and 51st gala. Tell me something about that.
Well, the Nashville Songwriters Hall of Fame is kind of in conjunction with the Nashville Songwriters Association, and the Nashville Songwriters Association every year has a song that they consider Song of the Year. And so back in 1989, before God was born, um, Garth and I won for If Tomorrow Never Comes, which was kind of a strange thing because he was just getting his career off. And we won this Song of the Year, which was the biggest honor you can get because your songwriter peers vote on that. So about 2 or 3 years ago, they had the 50th anniversary. And so Garth and I got to play at the Ryman and do If Tomorrow Never Comes together, which was a thrill. You know, anytime I can play the Ryman, it's just, I have to pinch myself that here I am standing on the Ryman stage. And 2 years ago, they had another thing of honoring Garth, and I got to play Ain't Going Down with a band at the Ryman, which I never dreamed I'd play electric guitar on the Ryman stage, but I got to do that, and it was exhilarating and scary at the same time.
Yeah, I noticed you. I heard you play that on, and I noticed you take a few more breaths than Garth does when he sings it.
Yeah, he sang that thing in one take when he recorded.
Did he really?
Studio, yeah, and we had done a work tape of it at my house and at my studio there when I had it, and it was pretty amazing when you compare what he did on the work tape to what he did in the studio. It's pretty scary how close he got. But the other writer, Kim Williams, his wife was a nurse, and Kim didn't think that Garth could sing that song all in one breath, so we took him an oxygen mask to the studio just in case, but he didn't need it.
No, it doesn't sound like he needed it. It sounds like he could have gone for another half verse.
Probably,
but you get
so.
you get amped up, and he seems like he gets a little amped up, a little keyed up, and you've got that extra gear maybe.
Yeah, he's amped up all the time. Anytime he's on stage, he's pulling that energy from the audience and sending it back to him. It's pretty phenomenal.
Tell me something about your relationship with him. I've read some about it, but I'd like to hear it straight from the horse's mouth.
Well, the way I met Garth is I had a recording studio and I had demo singers, because if you sing like me, you need demo singers in Nashville. And my demo singers at the time were Martina McBride and Joe Diffie, Faith Hill, Randy Travis, Billy Dean, Trisha Yearwood. None of these people could get record deals, so they were singing demos for me. And
Wow.
yeah, it's pretty wild. And so Garth was cleaning churches and selling boots, and he thought he could make more money singing demos, which was accurate. And so he brought me over a cassette and played me 6 songs. And I said, I'll start using you on demos. And he quickly became my favorite demo singer because he could sing anything. And that first day after he played me the cassette, when he was leaving, he said, I write a little bit too. And so I thought, well, shoot, he's cleaning churches and selling boots. He's got a big future ahead of him. I'll write with him. And so we set up an appointment to write. And the first time we got together, he was wearing these big, long dusters and big cowboy hats, and he was about 8 feet tall. And he came walking in, and I was sitting on my couch, and he was looking down at me, and he said, I've got this song I've run by 25 writers, and nobody likes it. And I said, well, gee, thanks. And he kind of got mad, and he said, well, don't you want to hear what I got? And I said, yeah, play me what you got. And so he played me what he had. And when he got done, I said, I love this idea. It's what my mother used to tell me: tell the people you love how you feel about them while they're still alive. And he said, well, what's wrong with it? And I said, well, you're killing somebody off in the first couple lines of the song. There's nowhere to go. So he said, what would you do? And I told him, and we did it. And at the end of the day, we had a song. And we both loved it. He did a guitar vocal in my studio, which can't be too bad. And we pitched it around town for about a year, and pitched him around town for about a year, and nobody was interested in him or the song. And one night he got a call to come play one song at the Bluebird Cafe in Nashville. Somebody who was doing an artist showcase didn't show up. And Garth sang that song, and somebody from Capitol Records was there to hear the other artist who didn't show up. And he came up to Garth afterwards and said, I know I passed on you for the 3rd time this week, but maybe we missed something. Why don't you come back in? So he went back in and got a record deal. And the song we wrote was If Tomorrow Never Comes. And that was his second single and his first #1. So that's the magic of Nashville.
Wow.
You just never know what's going to happen.
Yeah, and perseverance. I mean, that's a hard hit to take. That no is a hard hit to take when you're a singer, an artist, but evidently he takes it well.
Well, I don't know if he really took it well. I think he was kind of about ready to go back home. It's like, what's the matter? People don't get what I'm doing, and I can make more money back in Oklahoma playing bars than I can here. So it just happened at the exact right time. I think he was very disappointed, because it's your whole life in these songs, and when they keep turning you down, it's like, well, they don't like my baby, and what am I
exactly right?
Yeah. So
that's exactly right. I mean, because that kind of comes from your soul. I mean, this is your inner soul that's coming out in these songs, and somebody saying they don't really care for it, it's not the best thing I ever heard. Like, that's a huge insult because it's special to me.
Well, they kind of just don't even say that. They just say, well, pass. And it's like, okay, my whole life just went past me. And,
yeah, exactly. Yeah, for sure. So so Garth Brooks wasn't the beginning of your career. I guess you were playing around in Canada at some point. But before that, you were born in Woodstock, New York. Is that true?
I got the hat to prove it.
That's pretty neat.
Yeah, it was a really great place to grow up because it was an artist community before it was known as Woodstock. And there were painters that lived there and artists and authors, people that were actors down in New York City. They had a little getaway. And so there's no telling who you were going to meet. And as a little kid, I'd go to somebody's house and they'd be working on a big painting, or somebody would say, hey, I just wrote a book. You want me to autograph it to you? And I thought, man, that's a good way to make a living. And my dad worked for IBM, and he always said, do what you love. Don't do what I had to do on the assembly line. So he was always very supportive of me. And IBM back then meant I've been moved. And so we ended up moving in Kentucky, which was a different world from Woodstock, New York. And I spent a lot of my life there. And one love I got out of there was bluegrass, like your shirt.
Oh, yeah.
At the time, I taught guitar at a music store, and the banjo player who taught there was J.D. Crowe. And
oh, wow.
Yeah, not bad, huh? And
that's not bad.
When our students wouldn't show up, we'd kind of jam with each other, and he would show me some banjo stuff, and I'd show him some guitar stuff. And at that time, Tony Rice was playing with him, and so they would sneak me into the bar so I could hear him, and it was pretty fabulous.
What year was? What time was this?
It was probably 73, 74, something like that. And then Ricky Skaggs joined the band. Yeah. Jerry Douglas joined the band.
Jerry Douglas.
It was
so they had J.D. Crowe in the New South. That was around that time.
That was
not much after that.
And they were playing in a Holiday Inn. That's where they played. And so, like, anytime somebody really big came into town, like I brought the Burrito Brothers there one time. Linda Ronstadt would show up when she was in town. Everybody wanted to hear them, and here they were in a Holiday Inn. It was pretty wild. But
that is pretty wild.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the great thing about acoustic musicians like bluegrass. I mean, bluegrass gets kind of a hillbilly redneck kind of thing attached to it, but it's really just acoustic music. And if you can play if you can play in that context, you can play anything.
Right. Well, yeah, Tony Rice was the epitome of that. He was the best probably flat picker to come around, but he was also a big Django Reinhardt fan and could play jazz till the cows came home. And all those guys came. Jerry Douglas, they're all Ricky Skaggs are all phenomenal players, and they can play anything. And that's the beauty of Nashville. All these players that we have living here are just phenomenal.
Absolutely. So tell me about how WVLK in Lexington played a significant role in shaping your career.
Well, they would do this thing where they would show some local talent, and you had to enter this talent contest, send some songs in. And I was lucky enough to get a couple songs that were picked. And, for a songwriter, anytime somebody seems like they like what you're doing, it's just one step further down the line to allowing you to keep going on your career. And so I went in and recorded these 2 songs, and they got a lot of airplay in Lexington. And what happened out of that was the demo that we cut that got played in Lexington, I sent to an International Songwriters Festival, and it won Song of the Year. And
Oh, wow.
that was another big step of me moving to Nashville. I think it paid like $3,000 or something, which to me was like $1 million back then. But it
Absolutely.
allowed me to move to Nashville and hang out for a while and try to get my feet on the ground and see what was going on. So I owe a lot to that radio station and to the guys that cut the song and the guy who engineered it, all of that. It was just pretty lucky and pretty phenomenal.
For sure. I bet that was a huge boost of confidence too. Like to win a national contest, you blew into town with this swagger that you wouldn't have had otherwise, that probably sustained you for because somebody moving into town without that, it's a hard place to be.
Well, yeah, and it was a hard place to be, but I think it's way harder now, because back then there was a pretty good open door policy where you could walk into about any publishing company or record label and they would listen to something. And Music Row was 3 little streets, but you could walk down the street and you might see Reba McEntire or George Strait or Garth Brooks or Tim McGraw walking down the street. And it's kind of sad that now that's pretty much all gone and Music Row's turned into
Right.
condos, but it's lost that magic that it had. But I don't know if I ever had swagger. Once you go to the first songwriters round in Nashville and you hear some of these guys, it's like, man, I got a lot of work to do. There was a guy who ran Tree Publishing Company by the name of Buddy Killen, and he owned a restaurant there. And every Thursday night, they would have one of Tree's writers come and play, and it would be guys like Norbert Putnam or Ray Van Hoy or Bobby Braddock. And so I would go to those because they were free and I didn't have much money. And I would hear these guys just with their acoustic guitar that could just blow you away with these songs that they had. And so any swagger you had the minute you walked in, it kind of went out the door after you heard these guys. But it was a
Right.
great learning experience, and it showed you where the bar is. And
That's true. That's valuable.
Very valuable.
So the writers' rooms, I've written a song or two, but I've never written in a writer's room kind of setting. I've always been curious about how that works, how you get even into it. Like how do you go about that?
Well, if you
How
haven't
did you go about it?
if you haven't written in a writer's room, God has blessed you. At the time, writers' rooms were like little cubbies, and no windows, nothing. And so you would just get in there with another writer or 2 writers, because when you moved to Nashville, co-writing was a big thing. And I hadn't really done that much of it. And so what you do is anybody you meet, you want to write. And that's how you get in these writer rooms. And it wasn't the most congenial thing to being creative, being in these writer rooms. And but you had nothing else to do but write, because you couldn't look out the window and there wasn't any food around anywhere. So that's what you would do. And it got to the point sometimes where I was doing 3 writes a day. And so I was in a little cubby with facing people for 8 hours a day. And that was pretty interesting. And
That seems like it.
yeah. And so now, once there was a little more money coming into town in the 90s, the writers' rooms kind of got a little bit better, and they would have little studios in there where they would have maybe some snacks for you every once in a while. And now, from what I hear, most of the writers' rooms you go into have like full-blown studios, so that there's a track guy in the room helping you write the song, and they're doing the track while you're writing the song, and then they become the co-writer on the song. And it's a whole
really?
Yeah, it's a different world. To me, it's not organic at all, but that's just my interesting point of view on it. That's how it's done these days, though. That way, at the end of the day, with the track guy, you hopefully have a song, and that way the publishing company doesn't have to pay for a demo. So everybody's happy.
I can see that. I can
Yeah.
see that. But I guess did you write a lot of your stuff in those rooms? Or is most of your stuff a product of those rooms, or is it just like you and you said you and Garth would get together, kind of just the two of you, and kind of hash a song out that way? That seems a little more organic to me.
Yeah. And, at the time, pretty much everything was organic back then. We had no other ways. Modern technology hadn't caught up with us yet. And, Garth, from the first time I met him, I had just moved into this house, and that's when he came over to see my studio and stuff. And so we would write at the house 9/10 of the time. It was more open than being in a little writer's room down on Music Row. And he liked that a lot better. And we kind of
Well,
took it
you
from
had
there.
better snacks, probably.
Well, yeah, I got where I knew he loved Mexican food, so I got where I would fix him burritos. And at the time, I could get a real good source of different kind of refried beans and different kind of cheeses. And so I would fix him some kind of lunch. And that way you didn't break the vibe by going out to lunch. A lot of times you're writing with people like, well, let's go to lunch. And it's like, well, that might bust the vibe. But that way we were there, we'd eat some lunch, and then we go back to writing again.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I would just as soon not eat as break that creative kind of spirit.
Right. See, talk about dogs barking.
There it is. What kind of dog is that?
He's a mutt. He's a
mouthy mutt.
Well, I'll tell you, come on. Oh, I know. He says it's time to eat. Now, this dog's 16 years old. He's blind.
All right, I like old dogs.
And the reason he barks so loud is because he's deaf. So the more deaf he gets, the louder he barks. And so he's just, I don't know how he knows it's 3:30 almost, but,
I was going to say, we keep old dogs around too, and they lose their sight and they lose their hearing, but they don't lose their sense of what time of day it is, especially around dinner time.
Well,
they remember that.
And the older he gets, the more that's all he cares about is eating. So,
me too. I'm with you.
So there you go. He may bark again. I might have to get up and actually feed him, but half the time his train of thought just kind of dissolves. And oh yeah, I forgot. What did I want?
So in the mid 70s, you were playing guitar around Canada, I guess, with a touring kind of artist, playing that electric guitar you love to play.
Right.
And then, so tell me about what happened between then, kind of what life was between then and in 1982 when you had that number 5 single with Gary Morris.
Well, I was lucky enough to play guitar for this Canadian singer-songwriter by the name of Ian Tyson, who he's kind of like Gordon Lightfoot as far as Canadian, but he wrote Gordon Lightfoot's first number 1 song, and he had a big following up there, an amazing singer-songwriter, and I was his band leader. And so I had Canadian musicians that were playing with me, and we toured all over Canada, which was incredible. I lived in Calgary for a while and almost moved up there, but Ian was a great songwriter. 4 Strong Winds was one of them. Someday Soon is another big one. And because of that, he was a big fan of mine, which meant a lot to me that Ian Tyson liked what I was doing. And so he let me open his shows up with the band playing original material. And he was also very encouraging about moving to Nashville, Tennessee. So in 1980, I left Ian and moved to Nashville. And it was one of those things when I got there, I just started going around and trying to meet people. And I met a guy who had gone to Bloomington, Indiana University, where my wife had gone to graduate school. And he heard some of my songs, and I thought he would hire me as a writer, but he hired me to be a tape copy guy. Now, back then, you had reel-to-reels where if you were pitching a song, you had to put a song from a master to a little reel and splice it together and pitch the songs that way. It just boggles my mind. So you're working with razor blades all the time, which isn't really good for a songwriter or a guitar player. But so he heard me play guitar and he started using me on some sessions and stuff. And then finally he said, well, why don't we write a little bit? And so we got together and wrote some songs. And one of them was a song called Headed for a Heartache. And at the time, we had 20 record labels in Nashville. Now I think we have 3. And every one of them had softball teams. And it was a very competitive thing. And the guy that I wrote it with was a big athlete. And so he was on the same team as a guy by the name of Gary Morse. And Gary Morse had a record deal on Warner Brothers. And so in the middle of the softball game, he gave Gary a cassette of this song. And Gary ended up recording it, and it got to be a top 5 song. And it was really interesting because I thought it would take at least 4 years for something to happen. And in a year and a half, a whole lot of things started happening. I got like 6 or 8 songs cut. And I thought, well, this is easy. That was a mistake to say that. I think there's more inner luck.
Yeah, when you start saying stuff like that, God kind of puts you in your place a little bit sometimes.
Exactly. And so the good thing was, Headed for Heartache, I think I was the only guy who had a top 10 song who would write with Garth when he came to town. And that was the reason he wanted to write with me. And I heard from so many people that I knew afterwards, well, hell, if I'd known he was going to be Garth, I would have written with him. But,
What?
you just never know.
You do never know, especially in that town. There's seems like there's such a lot of talent there. I mean, I've been there quite a few times. That it would be hard to find because the level of talent is so high, and the stardom thing is such a strange thing. How it happens to some but not to others. It would be hard to pick it out if you were trying to pick it. If you're trying to pick up on it and grab one out of the group that's going to be the star, it would be hard to do. So you kind of just have been smiled upon by the gods when it happens because the talent is so deep.
Well, that's true. And the funny thing is, at that time, I was in a band with Billy Dean, who went on to be an artist on Capitol. And Billy was such a good-looking guy, such a great singer, great stage person, great songwriter. I thought, well, he was going to be the big star. And
Billy the Kid.
Yeah, Billy the Kid. And he's still phenomenal. But Garth is the one who came in and just kind of blew past everybody else. So it's like Don Henley's song, "Why Does Fortune Smile on Some and Let the Rest Go Free?" It's you hear all these talented people all the time, and nothing ever happens with them. And then some other people you think, well, they'll never have a chance. They go on to stardom. So it's pretty hard to pick them.
Yeah, it really is. The first time I saw, I'm coming from a little different perspective where I see people for the first time on CMT. I saw Kenny Chesney singing some little song that he had. It was a really good, really sweet little song, but I thought, well, I really wish that he could make it, but I just don't think that he has the image, the panache to be the big star. And then the next thing I know, he is the big star, and still is to this day. So it's really strange.
It really is strange. Yeah, I was surprised at that one, and there was a publicist who saw that Kenny could be a sex symbol, and she really worked on getting him to work out, and did this whole persona where he became a sex symbol. And
so sleeveless shirts.
What's going to happen? Yeah,
you never know.
Never know.
I want to talk a little bit about you being from kind of bringing some of that Woodstock, because I've listened to a lot of your songs, and they have, I'm from Texas, and my songs are Texas-y kind of songs. So if I were to move to Nashville and pitch my songs, they'd be great to pitch to I don't know, to George Strait if he still gets his songs from Nashville. I'm not sure. But
Right.
your songs kind of have a Beatles and the Birds, and it has kind of that worldly kind of feel to it that mine don't really have.
Well, the thing I had growing up in my favor when I was a little kid, all we had was AM radio. And on
Mm.
AM radio, you would hear the Beatles, you'd hear Tammy Wynette, you'd hear the Four Tops, you'd hear Frank Sinatra, you'd hear Roger Miller. It was such a dichotomy that I just loved all of it. And then when I started playing guitar, really my first love at the time, because I was a teenager, was rock and roll music. And I played in bands and played rock songs, played Jimi Hendrix stuff and all that. And then I started hearing some of these country guitar players who were fantastic, like the guy who played for Buck Owens, Don Rich, and the
Mm-hmm.
guy who played for Merle Haggard, especially Roy Nichols. They were just phenomenal guitar players, and that kind of
Absolutely.
got me into listening to country music and listening to the lyrics. And then the Byrds, one of my favorite groups, started doing country rock, and I guess they were the first group to really do country rock with Graham Parsons, and all that was a big influence on me. And so I just brought all that to the table when I write, and I still do. I mean, I think I write more Americana rock and roll now than ever. One of the critics here in town, Robert Orman, did a review on my record last year, and he said, "Well, he's Americana now," and I guess that's right because I don't really know what country is. But, I do a
Well,
lot
I mean that's
yeah.
true, and but I think Nashville being in the center of the country, I think it's Nashville is a great place for being a melting pot and being kind of the epicenter musically of what we are. Like
Exactly.
with your stuff, I definitely hear like a Don Henley kind of a ring. It's just got that soul of that in it, and there's nobody more than him that to me that is Americana.
Oh, I agree.
If you could distill it to an essence, Don Henley would be the guy, I think.
Well, that's a huge compliment coming from you because there was a time when I'd be writing songs and I'd think, what would Don Henley say on this? And it kind of helped me look at things a little different. And yeah, what a great body of work. Heart of the Matter is one of my favorite top 5 songs ever. So he's got a few of them like that.
Oh, definitely, definitely. What always gets me about listening to songs and going back and listening to Guy Clark, one of my favorite
Oh
writers,
yeah.
listening to these guys. Of course, he's a Texas guy. I wouldn't expect you to understand, but listening to these old guys, the old writers are the phrase is the phrasing and the stuff, and you listen to it and then you don't listen to it for a few years, and when you come back it's so fresh, and their turns of phrase are so sweet and so natural and well thought out. And Henley is the same way. He has a way of boiling down philosophy to just a few words, and that really is what songwriting is.
Well, he's from Texas too. So
Yeah,
he
for
brought
sure.
that with him. And, the guys like Guy, like you're talking about, and Guy was such a huge influence on Rodney Crowell and Steve Earle and all those other
Hmm.
guys that are such incredible writers, and Towns Van Zant, and
Absolutely.
it all just rubbed off on these guys, and they're carrying on the tradition. And the young guys coming up are kind of doing the same thing. So it's pretty
Hmm.
cool. But yeah, they've got that Texas thing, and I guess I've got a more rock and roll kind of thing.
Well, Texas is a big place. I don't know if you know it, but
That's
we're
what
in
I've
East
heard.
Texas.
Okay.
To get from from East Texas where we're at to El Paso is farther than it is to get from El Paso to Los Angeles. So Texas
Well,
spans a lot, and not just in
I,
real estate.
I drove that, and you're exactly right. Going across West Texas seemed like you were 3 or 4 days on the road right there at the time. And
Absolutely.
yeah,
Absolutely.
I've got some good friends in Texas. There's a guy, J. Boy Adams. I don't know if you've ever heard of him, but he's in the Songwriter Hall of Fame there. But I come down and do gigs with him a bunch of times around the Hill Country, and also we've done a bunch of benefits for Children's Cancer Hospital in Lubbock, and I just love all of Texas. It's such
It's a pretty good spot.
it's a pretty good spot. It's got could be 7 or 8 states, but it's
It
awesome.
could be.
Every one of them's got
Well,
their own little area, and I played in East Texas. I guess it was Tyler a few years ago, and that was really cool too. I just love
it's
Texas.
different over here.
Yeah,
Yeah, I do too. It's neat. They used to do a tongue in cheek commercial that said it's like a whole other country, which it was. It's the only state that was its own country at one point.
that is true, and some of them want it to be again.
well, I had to take my hat off that said most likely to secede on it before I came on here. So,
Yeah, I did notice the Texas hat right off the bat. So,
so one of the reasons we're interviewing you is because you have a new album that you're really proud of. Tell us something about that.
well, last year I did an album called "From the Beatles to the Bluebird," the Beatles to the Bluebird, and it was one of those things where I wasn't planning on doing another record, but I had two people that were very important to me in my early 20s pass away last year, and without knowing it, I wanted to write a song to kind of honor them and their lives. And so these songs started being born. And before I knew it, all these other songs started coming out. And before I knew it, I had 10 songs. And my wife was saying, well, you just did an album. What are you doing? And I'm like, well, I can't stop these songs from coming. It's like a baby wanting to be born. And so I had these 10 songs, and I thought, I really like this direction. And so Lee Francis, who's John Party's bass player, is my kind of band leader, and he does all the charts for me. And so I had him come over to the house, and I played him these songs, and he said, you got to record these songs. These are some of the best things you've done. So that meant a lot coming from him. And so that's what we did. We go into the studio, and we do it old school. We cut 10 songs in one day usually. And
wow, is that right?
That's right. And I
That's a day.
I sing the vocals and play rhythm guitar, and then I go back the next day and overdub electric guitars and stuff like that. But these guys are so good, like you're talking about Nashville musicians. Every time we go in, we cut 10 songs in a day.
Wow, that is super impressive. That reminds me. I'm wearing this bluegrass shirt. It reminds me of there's a Flatt and Scruggs song. It goes, Nashville cats play clean as country water. Nashville cats, and it's a song all about how good the Nashville musicians are. And been playing since there's babies. Yeah.
That was actually written by John Sebastian when he was in the Lovin' Spoonful, and they were out of New York City. But all those kids listen to Sun Records. The radio stations bounced across the skylines back then, AM radio. And so they were really influenced by everything Elvis and Carl Perkins and all those guys were doing. And they came to Nashville and kind of got their clock cleaned by how good these guys play. And that's how Dylan ended up coming to Nashville and playing. He brought a couple of the Nashville musicians to New York City, and he was so impressed with them that he said, well, I'm just going to go down there and record. And that kind of started a whole new thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I tend to like the thing that came from it.
Yeah. Very interesting thing. And it was another kind of country meets rock and rock meets country. And Dylan brought some of his music in, and then the Nashville musicians added their own flavor to it, which changed the total direction of what Bob was going in at the time. And those Nashville Skyline and Blonde on Blonde, those are incredible records cut in Tennessee.
Some of his best. What's the most memorable piece of advice you've ever gotten from a songwriter or otherwise in your career?
One of the best that I heard is, if you want to hunt tigers, you got to go where the tigers are. And that basically means if you want to be a country songwriter, you better get your butt to Nashville. If you want to be a Texas songwriter, you probably better get to Austin, and it's very few people. I mean, when I was living in Bloomington, Indiana, John Mellencamp, he was John Cougar at the time. He lived across the street from me. I was in the poor version. He was in the rich version. But, he's made a career out of being from Bloomington and Seymour, Indiana. But that's pretty impossible to do. You got to have the right things fall into place. So that was just one of those things. I knew I had to move to Nashville if I was going to try to be a songwriter, because you can't they want to see you here. They want to see you knocking on doors. They want to see you struggling. They want to see you hopefully getting better the longer you've been there. And if you're sending in stuff from somewhere else, like Lexington, Kentucky, they really don't know who you are or really care. And there's just so many talented people here that you're probably not going to get the chance. So you might as well move down here and see what happens.
And it's also the iron sharpens iron thing. I mean, with there being so much talent there, it makes you better so much quicker. Playing with better musicians, writing with better writers or more experienced writers. That's the way you progress.
That's right. They always say try to write up.
Definitely.
Same like when you were on a baseball team or something. You wanted to be with guys that were better than you, so you would get better. And
absolutely.
So that's kind of what works here in Nashville. You never know who you're going to run into, and it's also the thing of, there were years I probably wrote 300 songs a year, and I can't say very many of them were very good. But after 10 years of writing 300 songs a year, you get a better idea on what's good and what's not. And it all just makes you a better writer. The more you do it, it's like lifting weights or learning how to play electric guitar. The more you do it, it's at 10,000 hours, I think, and
absolutely.
That's the blessing of Nashville, because you have that testing ground. And how do I stand up to the rest of them? And,
yeah, exactly.
When I moved to town, there was a Nashville Songwriters Hall of Fame, but I never dreamed I'd be in it. But you just never know. So I'm very grateful for everything that's happened, that I ended up being in there. And there's, you look at the names of the people, and one guy that was a big influence on me when I was back in Kentucky was a guy by the name of Ray Van Hoy. And he didn't get in till after I got in, but I always thought he should have been in a long time ago. And I was just really happy when he finally got in, because he was having hits when he was 18 years old. And I'm in Kentucky reading these songwriter magazines going, who the hell is this guy? He's 18 years old. Songs, but it kind of showed you it could be done.
Right. Yeah, it's pretty rare for somebody to have enough wisdom to write a song that means anything at that age. I mean, it normally doesn't happen.
Well, and the good thing for him was he happened to be in the room when Bobby Braddock needed a co-writer on a couple things. And Bobby Braddock is, a total legend and has been for years. So I think one of the first things they wrote was Golden Ring by George and Tammy. So I think it helped.
That's a pretty good start.
Yeah. I think having the older guy be the thing that sharpened him up pretty quick.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a pretty legend. That's legendary, almost like my friend Kent Blazy. I mean, it's up there.
Well, I'll take that. It's fun that Rafe and I have gotten to be good friends, and I feel that's an honor too of being here in Nashville. So you just never know what's
that's neat. It's
just
neat.
Like playing electric guitar on the Ryman stage for Garth Brooks. I mean, whoever thought I'd be doing something like that? I never dreamed it. So
that is pretty wild. There's no bigger honor than to play on that Ryman stage in my mind. Just the smell of that room. That room feels like church.
Well, it is. It was a church, and they call it the Mother Church, and it really does feel like that when you're there. There's not a group that comes through here, pop, rock, country, jazz. They all want to play the Ryman. They all want to say they played the Ryman, and I think that's really cool.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's something about it, and there's just something. You're right about town. Holly and I were in town eating at some little place, and Steve Dorff walked in and sat down in the little restaurant we were eating. He was just a few booths down from us, so we got to talk to him. I just like talking to him. That's almost as big an honor as meeting my friend Kent Blazy.
Well, I mean, Steve Dorff's just one of the most amazing songwriter musicians that I've gotten to work with. I went out to California and wrote some things with him, and man, what a melodic guy, And
Absolutely.
I'm so glad he moved to Nashville because he fits right in so good here, And I've never heard somebody come up with any more beautiful melodies than Steve Dorff can come up with, and he's such a humble guy, as you probably, when you met him,
Mm-hmm.
figured out. And that's how most of the people are in this town. It's very cool.
It's really neat. It's really neat. I'm not sure that's the case anywhere else, where somebody who has that level of celebrity would be willing to talk to somebody like me.
What's your name again? Oh,
yeah,
no,
I'm just a dude.
that's the fun part of Nashville, and it used to be really more that way back in the '80s. Nashville people don't really care who you are, it's like they're just glad that you're here. Now we've got so many people coming in from out of town because of bachelorette parties and all the other stuff that it's not as easy just to walk around unnoticed as it was back in the 80s.
Right.
And that was when you could spot somebody at the grocery store, John Prine at the grocery store, or John Denver in the shopping mall, or things like that. And
that'd be pretty neat.
Yeah, that doesn't happen much anymore.
So I got another question for you. That's, if you had to choose one of your songs to be remembered by, which one would it be, and tell me why?
Well, I would have to say it's If Tomorrow Never Comes, and that's for a number of reasons. One, it's the first song that I ever got to write with Garth, and the cool thing with Garth is we're still friends, we still talk, we're still writing together, and that doesn't happen much in Nashville anymore. You can write a number one song with somebody and don't ever hear from them again. But we've continued our friendship. We wrote it about our wives, and it ended up being his first number one song. And the letters that we got from people around the world on how that song had touched them. And when I go do writer shows, still people come up and they tell me their stories. And I had always prayed that I would write a song that touched people's lives like that. And to me, that's the song that did it. And I'm just very honored to be on it. And I'm honored that after a year of everybody passing on it, it became a number one song and touched so many people's lives.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think you should be honored with that one. That's a great song, and I think it will outlive us both. It really resonates for
Yeah,
sure.
I agree with that. So thank you, Garth Brooks.
Yeah, we'd love to have him on the next episode, but I'm not sure if that's going to happen or not.
Well, if you can
But
track him
thank you.
down, good luck.
Yeah, exactly. We may not be able to pay him enough to make it worth his while, but
Hey, I'm getting paid for this. Now wait a minute.
yeah, your check's in the mail. It's on the
Woo!
way.
I'll tell you. I was talking to Gordon Kennedy, who plays guitar for Garth, and people were asking him about mailbox money. He said, I'll tell you what, there's so little mailbox money coming in now that I can't even buy a mailbox with the mailbox money coming
in. Or a stamp. Good grief, stamps are expensive.
They are.
Yeah. Well, thank everybody that's tuning in today. You can follow Kent Blazy at KentBlazy, BLAZY.com. And the links are going to be in the description. Be sure to check out his new album, My Life So Far. Kent, thank you so much for being on with us today.
It's been an honor, and honor to be on here with you too, and look forward to doing more.
Yes, sir. Well, we can't wait to see you again. like I say, it's an honor to have a legend like you, and maybe we'll see you down the road.
I hope so.
Yes, sir. Hey, y'all, thanks for tuning in to today's episode of the Come and Pick It podcast. If you enjoyed the show, be sure and hit that subscribe button and leave us a review if you're into that. Your feedback will help us reach more listeners like you. We got a brand new episode of Come and Pick It next week and more amazing guests lined up for you. Don't miss it. Until then, keep on picking it.